Steve Jobs' commencement story. Have you ever wondered why some people who face rejection, loss, and uncertainty still manage to change the world? Why do some fall while others rise higher than ever before? This is the story of Steve Jobs, a man who stood before a graduating class at Stanford University in 2005 and gave a speech that has inspired millions ever since. But his story wasn't just about success. It was about failure, loss, and starting over. It was about the lessons of life that no classroom could ever teach. So stay with me until the very end, because this story might just remind you of something deep within yourself. That your time is limited, and the only way to live fully is to live your own life. Steve Jobs once said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backward," and to understand him, we need to go back to the very beginning. Steve was born to a young, unmarried mother. She made the painful decision to give him up for adoption. From the very start, his life was uncertain. Would he be wanted? Would he be loved? But fate placed him in the arms of Paul and Clara Jobs, an ordinary couple with no college education but with extraordinary love for their new son. His mother, however, made only one request, that Steve be adopted by parents who promised to send him to college. Paul and Clara agreed, even though they could barely afford it. The first lesson from Steve's life is this: your beginning doesn't define your ending. Even if you start with uncertainty, rejection, or hardship, it can all become the foundation for something extraordinary. True to his biological mother's wish, Steve did go to college. He enrolled at Reed College in Oregon, but after just 6 months, he dropped out. Was it failure? No, it was freedom. Steve said, "I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And no idea how college was going to help me figure it out." He felt guilty for spending his working-class parents' savings on something that didn't give him meaning. But instead of leaving completely, he became a drop-in. He slept on friends' floors, returned Coke bottles for money, and walked miles to get a free meal at the Hare Krishna temple. And yet, this time of struggle became the seed of his genius. He attended classes that interested him, like calligraphy. He learned about fonts, spacing, and design. At the time, it seemed useless. But years later, when he created the Macintosh computer, it became the first computer with beautiful typography. That single class, that one random decision, shaped the future of digital design. And that's why Steve said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backward." The second lesson from Steve's life is this: sometimes the things that seem meaningless today will become priceless tomorrow. Steve Jobs returned home to California after leaving college. Together with his friend Steve Wozniak, he started building computers in his parents' garage. It was small, chaotic, and messy. But out of that garage came a revolution. In just 10 years, Apple grew from 2 friends tinkering with electronics to a company worth $2 billion with over 4,000 employees. At the age of 30, Steve Jobs had it all: wealth, recognition, and power. The world saw him as a visionary, the boy genius who changed technology forever. But life has a way of humbling us. Just 1 year later, everything collapsed. Steve clashed with the board of directors at Apple. And in the most shocking twist of his life, he was fired from his own company. Can you imagine? The company you started, the dream you built, the empire you created, suddenly taken away. Steve said, "What had been the focus of my entire adult life was gone." And it was devastating. He felt rejected, humiliated, and completely lost. For months, he didn't know what to do. He thought about leaving Silicon Valley altogether. But then, something unexpected happened. Steve realized that despite the pain, being fired gave him something precious. It gave him freedom. He was no longer weighed down by the pressure of success. He was free to dream again. He said, "The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. Less sure about everything. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life. During this time, he started Next, a computer company. He also bought a small animation studio called Pixar. Pixar went on to create the world's first fully computer-animated film, Toy Story, and it became the most successful animation studio in the world. Years later, Apple would buy Next, bringing Steve back to the very company that had once rejected him. But this time, he returned stronger, wiser, and ready to lead Apple into its greatest era. The third lesson from Steve's life is this: sometimes life will hit you in the head with a brick, but don't lose faith. Failure isn't the end, it is the beginning of a new chapter. Amid the chaos of building companies and facing rejection, Steve found something that grounded him. He met Laureen Powell, the woman who would become his wife and lifelong partner. He once said, "I'm pretty sure none of this would have happened if I hadn't been fired from Apple. It was awful tasting medicine, but I guess the patient needed it." Because of that painful detour, he found love, he built Pixar, he created Next. And eventually, he returned to Apple, where he would design the iPod, iPhone, and iPad, devices that changed how we live forever. The fourth lesson from Steve's life is this: sometimes, the worst things that happen to you will lead to the best things in your life. But perhaps the most powerful part of Steve Jobs' story was not about success. It was about mortality. In 2003, Steve was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer. Doctors told him he had only a few months to live. He described it like this: "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." Every morning, he would look in the mirror and ask, "If today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today?" And whenever the answer was no for too many days in a row, he knew something had to change. Steve reminded us, your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your inner voice. And most importantly, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. As he ended his speech at Stanford, Steve shared a farewell message. It was a phrase he once read on the back cover of an old magazine: "Stay hungry. Stay foolish." To Steve, it meant never stop learning. Never settle. Never let fear hold you back from chasing the life you were meant to live. And now, let me turn his words toward you. Life will not always be easy. You will face rejection. You will stumble, fall, and sometimes lose what you thought you could never live without. But remember this: failure is not the opposite of success, it is a part of success. Love what you do. Follow your heart. And live each day as if it were your last. Like Steve Jobs said, stay hungry. Stay foolish. If this story inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs motivation today. And if you want more powerful stories that will help you learn, aspire, master, reflect, and evolve, then subscribe. Thank you.